if I see this correctly, then I'm standing between you and coffee, or you and cake, or both. So I'm deeply sorry, and as an academic, I of course have the tendency of like not being concise and always talking too much. So, so if you want to get quickly to coffee, you have to be like, Carsten, stop, go on, next slide. Anyways, so I gave the talk, the title, Slightly Fancier Post-Quantum Cryptography. Why is that? Because let's say from a theoretician's perspective, we kind of solved the easy things, and now comes all the rest. Now, is all the rest relevant for actual people who work with real things? Not necessarily, but there's hope. Yes, so that's why I said, and in this slide, my title is, we kind of solve the most important PQ transition problems. And I mean, we here as the cryptography theorist community, right? All the talks today have been about like how horrible it's going to be to transition to post-quantum cryptography. But if you ask a theoretician, it's like, all this stuff is there. All the technology has been developed, right? Now just like, use it and get on with your life. How difficult can this be, right? You just like deploy the new code and everything will just work. Of course, everything will not just work. And now you have to deal with humans and systems of humans and not just computers, which makes this hard. But as, people who are in a community of theorists, you're like, this is not a difficult problem. And of course, I'm saying that we solve the most important problems, right? Just like, please don't say that, don't make a picture of the slide and show it to funders, right? Because in every research application I'm writing, I'm saying like, there's this important problem in post-quantum crypto that is still open. Whereas like, if you think about it, right, the two big problems were, the really big problems were of course signatures and camps, and they have been solved to some extent. And for signing, I don't have to remind you, all of you know, right? There's MLDSA and Falcon, which you should use in hybrid mode and otherwise not. And as Bas was saying earlier, it's likely going to be MLDSA, and we're going to be stuck with this for at least, let's say, a decade, right? So NIST is running this like new competition or ongoing competition where they are looking for additional candidates for digital signatures. But if we think about what is going to be deployed and accelerated in hardware and all these kind of things, right, which you need in practice, this is going to be what is standardized right now, and that's MLDSA. Falcon is the standard isn't there yet, and it's going to be it's a pain. And stateless hash DSA or Sphinx DSA is for most applications just too slow. So there are of course proposals in this new signature call, a new round, that are of interest. Feast, of course, I have to promote it. Hey, I'm one of the people behind it. Also, Mayo is interesting because of the small signature size, for example, and comparatively small public key for a UOV signature scheme. But will we see those things being deployed 5 years from now? My guess is we're going to be stuck with MLDSA and Sphinx for the time being. And when it comes to key exchange, well, you're going to use it's going to be MLChem, or it's going to be HQC if you're allergic to lattices. So, I mean, of course, there's this like ISO process of trying to standardize Protocam or classic McAleese. But in the end, what is going to be in software and what is going to be in hardware, I think what people will follow is what the big tech companies in the US are doing, and they are going to do what NIST standardizes. So I don't really see us using a lot of McAleese or classic McAleese or Protocam in the future. It's my like, Bas, you might disagree, but
if there's something that's actually good instead of McAleese or performance,
what is good in?
Well, if we have something that's actually much smaller and it's not NIST, then we can still deploy it. That McAleese isn't one of that.
Yes, and now that there are questions about the security, I mean, if we might see more attacks on McAleese in the future, but yeah, performance is bad, and It's just, we're stuck with this for some time, right? So, but then, like now, if you come from theory land like me, you can ask the question, hey, what's next, right? And the what's next question is, well, there is a lot of cryptography out there, and a lot of it is not post-quantum secure. And what I will look at today, or what I will mention is, so I made slides for 3 topics. I'm gonna be way too slow, so maybe I'll only focus on 2 of them. So that's gonna be oblivious pseudorandom functions and threshold signing and blind signatures. And the reason why I want to talk about this is they all seem like a little bit more complex than signing and MLChem. But like if you actually try to solve them in a post-quantum setting, it becomes a mess. And at the same time, they're arguably like somewhat relevant in practice, right? So a lot of cryptography that we make up as theoreticians is completely useless in practice. But this is like the middle ground. Things like oblivious PRFs, like this, if you take password authenticated key exchange, which is being deployed at least by Apple, and some others might do it now that opaque is getting standardized, that uses a oblivious pseudorandom function. If you switch that out for a post-quantum OPRF, great. So that is actually something people might have to look into. Blind signatures, this is what will be behind the EU digital identity wallet if we get something that is decently secure, or anonymous credentials, so something more extended. So this is actually something worth looking into. In particular, because this EU DI wallet will have to be post-quantum by 2030. So maybe we should have a look at that now. So let's start with OPRFs. It's kind of the easiest interactive cryptography, I would call it. Who of you knows what is an OPRF and who doesn't? Some people don't. So you know, often what we have in cryptography is like we have a key, we have an input, and out comes something that looks random, right? So that's what we usually call a pseudorandom function. And in an OPRF, you are in a situation where now there are 2 people, usually Alice and Bob, or a client and the server, and the client has the input and somebody else has the key. It's like you're now not having the inputs to the function in 2 places, but you have them only in 1 place, but you have them in 2 places. And in the end, the client is going to end up with the evaluation of the OPRF. And this would all be very simple if the server can just learn the input and everything will be fine, but you want to make the additional constraint that the server doesn't learn what X is. So seems to be seems not too difficult, but turns out to be difficult if you want to make it post-quantum secure. And applications for this, well, PSI with an asterisk, like PSI has some uses in practice, but the OPRFs they use look different. Privacy pass, I mean, now Cloudflare uses something else, I heard, but you can at least build it from OPRFs. And then things like PAKE, like password authenticated key exchange, which you know, at least people in big tech companies are aware of and might be interested in deploying. And there's kind of a standard proposal or a standard solution to this, which is super old. Like if you want to build an OPRF using Diffie-Hellman, this has been solved, you know, decades ago. And that's the problem, right? So the OPRF that we have that is classically secure is super simple. And that's great. And it's like you do a round of Diffie-Hellman, but you do something slightly more tricky. So you have your input. How does it work? And unfortunately, there are going to be some formulas on this on the slides because, you know, I come from a university, so sometimes we have to put formulas there. So you hash your input with a regular hash function. You end up with a group element, raise it to some random power that you pick, and then you send it over to the server. Now, obvious, you get a random point. Server has no idea what's going on. Now there's a key. Server just raises whatever it gets to that key and sends it back. And then the trick is you can kind of divide out the randomness in the end, and then you hash it again, and boop, out comes something random. And this is super simple. It's like one message in one direction, one message in the other direction. Everybody, like the client does 2 group exponentiations, the server does 1. You can easily make this secure against like active attackers, which don't do what they're supposed to do, but you can at least detect that. And yeah, so this is also super fast. So people have been looking into, hey, what other OPRFs can we build? But if you do something in practice, like with let's classically secure, you do this because this is the simplest thing to implement. That's like a few microseconds for the elliptic curve group operations that you do there. Now, if you look at this as a if you look at this slide as a theorist, right? You're like, well, there are two inputs, there are outputs, there is some computation on the inputs. I can build OPRFs and I will do it using what is called two-party computation. So what is two-party computation? It's kind of a more general paradigm where instead of saying I evaluate a PRF in secret, it's now you can get inputs from both parties and you can compute an arbitrary function on these inputs. Right? And then your magic box that is in practice implemented by a cryptographic protocol spits out the result of that computation. That is clear? I guess everybody has heard this before, right? And now, how do we get to an OPRF? Well, we somehow have to get rid of the output to the server and stick in like a pseudo-random function as the circuit. And then you think about, if I have a post-quantum 2PC and I have a quantum secure PRF, I'm done, right? How difficult can this be? We have solved the problem. No, right? Because again, the solution that exists that is classically secure runs in microseconds or faster. This, if you do the standard approach, is not going to run in microseconds. Quite the opposite, as we'll see in a moment. So candidates for a pseudo-random function. So some version of AES sounds like a good idea that you can do. And people actually have been trying this out. Now there are two other candidates which people choose, and the reason is because they're efficient in two-party computation. So you need to have a PRF and you have to run it inside some other cryptographic protocol. And what works well are like two very non-standard pseudo-random functions. One is called Legendre, and the other is called crypto dark matter. Let's ignore how that works. I mean, I could explain to you now how they work, but it's not going to be like of any interest. What we're going to see is it's still going to be very inefficient, and we are even using like not very standard cryptography there. So let's throw AES into this two-party computation and see how fast it is. There's actually been a great work by Fala et al. Where they've done this. There's also been earlier works which have been building oblivious PRFs from other secure computation-friendly block ciphers, let's say. And so what they get to is, well, in a LAN setting, you can kind of get 50 milliseconds for one OPRF evaluation. Or if you have constraints on your bandwidth and like a rather big ping, then you end up with 1.7 seconds. And that is a lot of time if what you had before is microseconds. So in terms of practical relevance, yeah, well, but it's an interesting starting point because this uses kind of things that are standard and well researched. So if you take the not so well researched stuff, like this like new Legendre PRF, that people rediscovered only to build like post-quantum OPRFs and signatures, then things get a bit faster. So we can get down to like 180 milliseconds per input, which is quite nice. I think both of the works that I mentioned here don't talk too much about like some parts of the 2PC protocol, which is the preprocessing, which is the important part. But you end up with something in the end like 180 milliseconds. The problem is you use something that has bad, it's not well understood so far. And then last but not least, this dark matter pseudo-random function. Well, this thing has been built in 2018 to have something that is like very good that runs in zero knowledge proof or in MPC. And it's really cool in a 2PC setting. Like you get down to 50 microseconds. Woohoo, that's really fast. What they did though forget is that the important part, which is like some pre-computation, which you do before the OPRF, that had not been implemented. So, and that is actually quite complex in this setting. In comparison, Martin Albrecht has also been looking into what happens if we run this in FHE, TFHE. So that has a runtime of 150 milliseconds. But actually they say like our implementation misses some important details, and you should slap a factor 10 on top of that. And also they benchmark this on a machine which has like around 100 cores and 750 gigabytes of RAM, which is like not the most practical setting, I would say. Like not everybody has that standing around. It's great work. Like I don't want to criticize Martin for doing this. But if you do FHE evaluation, you have to have a lot of RAM. So, well. But yeah, so we're away by a factor of at least 100, if not more, from the classical setting. Now the thing is, people have been looking a lot into OPRFs because they are like, they are important. So what else has there been? There's a classic paradigm of building OPRFs, a different one, which is called Nauer-Reingold. And I think the state of the art in isogenies is a protocol called Opus. So that relies on like jumping happily through your isogeny graph. It has a lot of interaction, a lot of rounds, and I think the implementation runs 8.7 seconds per input. That is not great. And there's been some other work later on that likely built something that is faster, but that has never been implemented, so I don't know. And also for lattices, Lena Heimberger was also like behind the first OPRF. So they've been constructing an OPRF that is actually really fast. That runs in less than 2 milliseconds for lattices. However, that uses a PRF that is like, so they didn't make it up, but they kind of found it somewhere. It's called Spring. It's not like a bad proposal. It has been like around since 2013, 2012, maybe a bit afterwards. But it hasn't been as well analyzed as a lot of other cryptography. But it relies on this Nauer-Reingold paradigm that actually makes it easy to implement it fast. Then I'll throw it in here, even though it doesn't really belong there. If you want to rely on more like standard lattice assumptions, there's a work by Albrecht and Gur. I think it makes a previous proposal by Nigel and friends faster, but I think they didn't implement that. But it's kind of doable-ish, but none of this is like has a performance that people in industry would need. So there is a lot of work to be done. OPRFs, post-quantum OPRFs. Be my guest, look into this. Threshold signing. Who of you doesn't know what secret sharing is? Who of you is not attending what I'm saying right now? Okay. So secret sharing, you all know. If you ever did a course in cryptography that is beyond the standard introduction into the classical schemes, then you likely have been forced secret sharing to hear about secret sharing. And what it does is you take an input and you split it into multiple pieces, and now everybody holds a piece of it. And the cool thing is, if you look at the individual pieces, if you look at the individual pieces called shares, you have no idea what the secret is. Like let's say T of them, you don't know what the secret is. But if you put more of them together, then you can actually reconstruct the secret. That is really neat. Why is that? We had heard about blockchains earlier today. So what often happens there? So what happens in blockchains, as you all know, is that for Bitcoin or also Ethereum, right, that a transaction is signed by a secret key of a digital signature scheme. Now, if somebody steals this secret key, somebody has stolen all of your assets. And if you have run something like a cryptocurrency exchange, then you have a lot of money in your wallet and a lot of money belonging to which could be stolen if somebody gets hold of your secret key. So you kind of have to protect that. And it turns out this has people have been stealing secret keys from exchanges, cryptocurrency exchanges before. There have been thefts in cryptocurrencies like for all kinds of reasons, but one of them is somebody steals your secret signing keys. And one solution for this problem is use threshold signing, right? So where you hide the secrets among multiple servers. Now, is that the solution to everything? No. Because you need to still, you actually need to make sure that somebody who could steal some of the shares can't steal the shares from the other computers. And that is difficult. In particular, if you, as some people do, run your threshold signing on one machine. So like on one machine, you still have all the shares, but you kind of have them like in different processes, and this is now secure, I don't know why. Or you just replicate everything on the same, software versions in the same code base and deploy it everywhere. It doesn't give you any extra security. If somebody finds a bug in your system, you can steal it all, right, in one go. So how much security does it give you in the end? I don't know. But people are willing to put money into this. That's the interesting thing, right? So there are companies like Fireblocks, for example, or Unbound that has been bought by Coinbase, or because I'm from Denmark, right? Sepior that has been bought by Blockdaemon, and they've been building these threshold signing protocols. And in particular in the cryptocurrency space, people actually buy that as a service. So, yay. Now the thing is, if we go to the post-quantum setting, right, how difficult can this be? And so there's this thing called MPC, which is just like the 2 from 2PC you replace with an M. So instead of two-party computation, you have multi-party computation. And now you're like, well, before that we put a PRF into the 2PC and everything worked. Now we just throw the signing algorithm into the MPC and everything will work. Well, how well is this going to work? And for that, we first have to ask, well, what do we want to actually put into a threshold signatures key, right? Let's say MLDSA, Falcon, Sphinx, right? Something else. All of this is doable in theory, but in theory, a lot of problems have been resolved, right? But that doesn't mean, like, if you have a signing time of 2 days in your MPC scheme, it doesn't mean that this is of any relevance for people out there. 2 folklore theorems, if you are an MPC person, are: number 1, never compute a hash function inside MPC. That is a very bad idea, because it's very slow. Number 2, never do conditional branching in MPC, because this is very, very slow. I think you've been, I guess, trying this, and or not trying, but have been seeing people trying this. Anyways, so let's keep these 2 folklore theorems in mind. That's the only time today I use the word theorem. So let's see what we have. So what is a stateless hash-based digital signature algorithm going to do? It's going to hash a lot of things, and that is actually what the signing of SLH DSA consists of. So that's not going to run in the threshold setting. It's like just running 1 or 2 instances of SHA-512 takes forever. Let's not even talk about what you need for this. So lattices. There's Falcon. Falcon actually doesn't look too bad. You run like 1 hash function because it's like a hash and sign algorithm, and then you sample a pre-image. And doing pre-image sampling in MPC, like for Gaussians or Gaussian sampling in MPC, is actually something that people have been looking into for some time, like since 2010. The thing is, people have been looking into it for a long time. The problem is people haven't been making much success since 2010. The issue is, so what these lattice-based signing algorithms like Falcon require you is to be very accurate when sampling something from a discrete Gaussian distribution. Because if you're not accurate, you're going to leak the secret key, and that's bad. So if you ever implemented a Gaussian sampler, the 2 things that you do are either you branch a lot or you do table lookups. Now, I told you that this is very bad in MPC, so Falcon is also out. So MLDSA. Good, so that's the last standing candidate that we could have a look at. It only does 1 hash function call, as you can see in line 3. And the problem is then comes the sampling algorithm. So the issue about MLDSA, if you actually want to sign something in MPC, is it doesn't just hash your message and something else, but then it generates a vector that has like only a small numbers of non-zero positions. And that algorithm is very painful in MPC. And then also, if you know your MLDSA, you know that like it might take multiple attempts unless it's done. And that, of course, leaks information. So again, you have a conditional branch inside your MPC, and that is a pain. However, times have been changing, in particular very recently. Just a few weeks ago, there have been 2 works that appeared on ePrint. One of that by Borin et al. So they actually like massaged the secret sharing scheme so much that in the end you can actually do your rejection sampling and hashing like all locally, and in the end you combine everything and it works out. Their scheme only works for just up to 6 parties, for exactly 6 parties. So not general solution of everything, but their signing time is a few milliseconds, including everything, and that's cool. The other solution is that I found really clever, is like appeared around the same time on ePrint. It's just a paper by Beanstalk et al. So what they look at is, they said, let's try to implement MLDSA by not implementing MLDSA. So what they did is, they looked at the signature algorithm and were like, well, what if we poke it a little bit here? It's one specific spot. And if you do that, what your signing algorithm is going to generate is still a signature that verifies under your usual MLDSA verification algorithm. It's a slightly different signing algorithm though. But that change makes it actually possible to implement this using MPC. It's like really great work. And then they use standard MPC techniques to implement it. Their signing time, like even for 60 parties, is like below 100 milliseconds, or I think around 100 milliseconds. Now that excludes the pre-processing. However, to their defense, first of all, they're very open about this, and second, this is just was a super rough implementation using like off-the-shelf code and whatever is there. So if one digs into this, one could actually build something that is reasonable. And then, just for completeness, I also want to mention that Sophia Chili, yeah, my first name is Sophia, right? Yes, not that I get her name wrong, that would be embarrassing. So they built a threshold version of Mayo, which is currently under submission for potential standardization. And they also built something that is like practical-ish, I would say, also using standard techniques. So in comparison to the OPRF setting, I think now for threshold signing, we actually made some progress, like as a community. Yes?
So here we're doing threshold signing for an existing signature scheme, but what if you design the signature scheme to be easily adaptable to threshold signing?
So, good. I mean, you could argue that Mayo or something like this actually is good for that, because you're just like solving a system of linear equations in MPC, and this is like surprisingly efficient, and all the rest is also doable. Now, the works before that looked into threshold lattice-based signing, like they've all been looking at something like Raccoon, which is a signature scheme that is simpler than MLDSA, and so they were getting towards Raccoon. But I don't know of any other signature scheme that has been developed that is like good for threshold signing in the post-quantum setting. Like, I mean, maybe something isogeny-based could actually work, but then isogenies are already so slow. Like, if you do that in MPC, yeah, I think the research direction here is important because both MLDSA is going, like, this is going to be seen everywhere. We already see it quite a few places, and I have a feeling that we might also see Mayo more often. So this is actually like working for things where the verification algorithm is going to be working out of the box. No changes to your code base, no changes to the standard. That's what you need. Right? You can generate signatures that verify on any off-the-shelf consumer device. or hardware, or implementation, software library, whatever. Good. And that's what is interesting as a research direction. You can make up your own signature scheme, but if it's like, if nobody cares about it, like, whatever, right? You're very good at generating signatures that nobody will ever verify. Meh. Also, again, I think the ship has sailed for the time being, and I don't think we're going to see yet another round of even more signatures. And if we see more signatures, I'm not sure we see adoption. Yes?
You haven't talked about it, but in MPC, in the head-based schemes, what if you, instead of doing it in the head, do it with multiple parties?
So that is the standard way that one would hope you could get a threshold signature. The thing is, in MPC, in the head, like you always kind of assume that like at least one party is like not corrupted. And in your MPC, and then you like open the views of all the other parties. Now you don't know who that is, right? So you have like your attacker that might corrupt some parties in the real world in your MPC, but then you have like your like challenge response that opens some parties. Now if that doesn't intersect, you now have the views of everybody, and your secret is leaked. And there's actually been some great work from 2 years ago by Yash and Yash Kondi and who else was that? Jack Turner, and I forgot the third student's name, who showed that like for signatures like MPC in the head, it's very likely that you can't do signing efficiently. Like there are actually lower bounds. Yeah. Okay. Who of you is still with me? Woof, more than half. Who of you wants me to shut up so you can get cake right now? Thank you. Okay, last but not least, blind signatures. So first of all, what is a blind signature? So so usually in your signature setting, you all know your signatures, right? There's a signer, there's a verifier, and now we also add a user. So 3 people instead of 2. And so what happens in the blind signature, so your user walks around and he or she has a message that should be signed. And you have your signer that generated the signing key and the verification key and sending out the verification key to everybody who wants to have it, but keeps the signing key to itself. Now they run some cryptographic protocol and the user ends up with a signature, and then the user can present the signature and the message to somebody else and be like, ta-da, I have a signature. Like so far so good. You could be like, well, that is what a standard signature scheme can do, Carsten, why are you wasting our time? So yes, you want the usual, that the user can't forge signatures, or the verifier should also not be able to do it, but never mind. So that is the same as usual, but in addition you want that the signer never learns the message. And even if you have that the user like generates 2 or 3 signatures, right? And even if the signer and the verifier collude, like the signer should never be able to find out which of like those interactions actually contained the message. Yeah. So that is the guarantee that you want to have from a blind signature. Now these have been solved in the classical setting way before I was born. So David Chaum in 1982 introduced the notion of a blind signature, I think it was 82, and built a construction based on RSA. And this construction is super efficient and simple and nice, right? So this, and he proposed an eCache scheme based on it, and that's all great. And then Schnorr came around, who recently passed away, and he proposed, well, we can use the Schnorr signatures, what we nowadays call Schnorr signatures, and you can use that too to build blind signatures. Then 5 years ago, people came around and said, ha, that's not secure. Not that secure, but at that point he destroyed the RSA crypto system, so I'm not sure he minded so much. Anyways, in the classical, some people got it. In the classical setting, this has been resolved some time ago. Like the solution on RSA is very simple. The solution based on Schnorr If you don't need to run a lot of instances in parallel, it's also secure. But there has been a third way of doing blind signatures, and that is much more interesting. If you know your Kamenisch-Lizanskaya anonymous credentials, they are actually running a version of this under the hood. So actually, I think later on Mark Fischlin looked at this and was like, ha, this is a blind signature scheme. And he wrote, like, he formalized everything and proved that in UC, like, how to do this. Like, there's a lot of work that was in there. But we nowadays know this as Fischlin blind signatures. So again, you have your signer, your user, your verifier. You have your signer that uses any kind of signature scheme. Your user has a verification key, a message, verifier, boop, same setup as we had before. The way how it works is that the user, instead of sending like any encryption or whatever, you just take your off-the-shelf commitment scheme that you love and trust, such as a hash function, and you hash your message, like pad it with some randomness, whoop, send that out to the signer, and are like, here is my commitment. Now the signer is just going to sign it and give it back to you. Ha, nice. Now comes the trick, and that is quite some voodoo. Now you do a zero knowledge proof. As the user, you do a zero knowledge proof to the verifier. And what do you say? You say, verifier, you know the verification key, and here's my message. And by the way, I'm going to prove to you that I know that I can generate a commitment and that I have a signature that on this commitment actually verifies. So if we look at this here, this is quite a complex statement, but like the moment you understand it, it's like, this is a beautiful way of doing blind signatures. Is like all the magic actually happens here. Like this is all blind because it's zero knowledge. It's all it's unforgeable because it's a signature scheme. Everything works nicely together, but you just like non-black box throw your cryptography inside the zero knowledge proof and just let everything happen there. And as before, right? Before I said for OPRFs and for threshold signing, it's like if we have like a generic solution, like 2PC or MPC, and then we throw a problem into the generic solution, we at least find the generic solution that is post-quantum secure. And the same holds here, right? If you throw in a proof system that is post-quantum secure, and a commitment that is post-quantum secure, and a signature scheme that is post-quantum secure, the whole thing should be post-quantum secure. Let's not talk about efficiency if you do that as is, but it is at least there, right? Good. The cool thing is, in particular, if you have trapdoor, like sign and hash based signature schemes like Falcon or Mayo or so, these are usually really nice for these kind of proof systems, for these kind of approaches. And in the lattice setting, this has been observed some time ago. There's been work by Judy and friends, and then had been implemented CCS last year. And they actually get away with your standard lattice-based assumptions, so LWE and SIS, which are also powering Falcon and MLDSA, plus some extra assumptions that they make there. And they actually get to blind signatures of like 80 kilobytes and less than half a second for showing that you know for the actual signature showing process. That has been quite some progress. But they kind of built their own signature scheme, which you could, if you want to insult people, you say it's kind of a version of Falcon, but it's not. It uses some like standard trapdoor, like some standard trapdoor sampling, and then some like clever tricks of putting everything together. Like a lot of work went in this. Like just me saying some clever tricks, like a lot of work to get this as efficient. Bootle et al. In 23 had a work that has later on been implemented by Lubashevsky, Seiler, and a student. And so they use a stronger assumption, but then they are able to like squeeze down the signature size to like 29 kilobytes. Cool. That is like definitely much more handleable than 80. And I mean, the alternative RSA blind signatures, like they are as big as, I mean, that's like an RSA signature, right? So we're still far away from that, but still not bad. And then a showing time of less than 200 milliseconds. That's quite something. So quite some impressive work. And so far I've only been talking about things that other people have been doing. So now I get the opportunity to talk about my own work. And as every academic knows, this is like the most exciting thing. So we looked at the state of the art and we asked ourselves, and actually not just we, also like Bas asked me that question. So it's like, why don't you use Mayo as the signature scheme? So we were like, yeah, well we could, so let's do this. So the way how Mayo works is, you have a lot of matrices, they are public, and your signature are, your signature is basically a vector S, such that if you multiply it from left and right onto the matrices, it gives you your original message back, or a hash of the message. And in order to get from like the hash of the message, like hash and sign, back to the signature, you actually use a trapdoor algorithm. So in Mayo signing, verifying the signature is super easy, generating the signature is hard, but in Fischlin's way of doing a blind signature, we only need to verify a signature in the zero knowledge proof, so this should be easy. And it turned out it is. So basically you only verify like quadratic terms, and that turns out to be fast. And since the signature scheme is called Mayo, we sat down and were thinking like, what is the most ridiculous title we can give this? And luckily this is joint work with Ward Boyens, so he is a genius when it comes to that. Also a lot of other things. So we came up with Pommes frites, proof of Mayo for forgery resistant identity tokens. So it's a work with him, Marvin, who is at DTU, and Shibam from Graz. So what are we doing? So the first thing we do was like just basically a feasibility study, which is, what if we take Mayo as is and throw it into the throw it into a non-interactive zero knowledge proof system. The one we used is called Vol in the Head, which is also behind Feast and some other submissions to the NIST second round of or additional signature thingy. So then what we have to do is we kind of have to hash something twice in the zero knowledge proof, and then we have to show that matrix mult gives you whatever you hash there. Now the left side is easy. You have a public matrix, you have a secret vector, and that's just like degree 2 constraints. Like that's something that is very simple to prove. But the right side looks like a pain. Initially we thought this looks like a pain. How difficult can this be? Right? Because I said earlier, you never want to evaluate a hash function inside the MPC, and zero knowledge proofs are, a kind of a squeezed down version of MPC. So very often if something doesn't work in MPC, it also doesn't work efficiently in zero knowledge. So we looked at it and we're like, how bad can this be? And then we were like, not too bad. So we looked at Shake. So this is Shake. And then we looked a bit more closer at Shake. So what happens in Shake? So Shake is a hash function, right? It's this sponge-based construction, and it takes part of the input, runs it through a permutation. Now you get out a state. You XOR more of the input in, same permutation again, boop, 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 until all your input is gone. And if you generate the output, you're just looking at the state. Take the first part of it, be like, this is the first part of my output, and if you want more output, you run the same permutation again. So it's like you're doing the same thing all over again. Nice. And then we looked at, so what does this permutation actually do? And it turns out that it's also 24 times the same thing. Neat. So each round of the permutation is like, well, you run a linear layer and then another linear layer. They are different because symmetric key people care about how the different linear layers look like. If you are into your multi-party computation or your knowledge proof, you're like linear layers, linear layer, it's all the same, I do not care. What you know is that they are very simple because they are usually for free in your proof system. You're just like, boop, and done is the linear layer. But then comes the nonlinear part. But that is just a degree 2 polynomial, degree 2 map that you're computing. And actually, since I said up there it's a permutation, this is an invertible map, and this is an invertible linear map, and this is an invertible linear map. So this thing, you can also look at it backwards. You can be like, what happens if I evaluate this thing backwards? And then we figured, the inverse map only has degree 3. This is not very high. The thing is, if you do a zero knowledge proof, the bigger your degree of what you're trying to prove, the less efficient things get. But if you only do degree 2 forwards and you only do degree 3 backwards, you can do some tricks. And the trick that we did was, we kind of made a meet in the middle approach to verifying your hash function. What you do is, instead of like proving every round of the hash function has been done correctly, you only commit to like every 6th round, and then you do a meet in the middle attack where you evaluate things forward. Now this increases your degree that you're proving, but you only go from degree 2 to degree 16 that we can handle. And now you do the same thing backward. Now backward you can do 2 rounds, and then you have a degree 3 map that gives you something, and the degree 16 map, and now you check that it's the same, and you're done, and you walk away, and you're happy.
What about the XOR?
Oh, about the what?
The XOR?
XOR? Yeah, like, I mean, that's a linear function, right? So that's just stuff you can always like throw in there. That is kind of nothing that you actually have to pay for. And the cool thing is about vol in the head, that actually allows you to prove high degree constraints rather efficiently. Like something like degree 16, that's still cool. If we would go to a higher degree, it would all be too slow. But that's like kind of a nice sweet spot. So we did this, and I'll show you benchmarks in a second. And I'm almost done. As every good academic, I'm running over time. But there's only 2 more slides, so please. And then solution number 2 was we looked at this and we asked ourselves, do you actually have to throw the hash function into the non-interactive zero knowledge proof? And we figured out maybe no. So we built a way of the signature scheme that like works with our zero knowledge proof system, but not otherwise. And the cool thing is there's never now a hash function being computed inside the zero knowledge proof, and then everything just becomes even faster. And throwing, like, that makes a stronger assumption on your Mayo signature scheme. Before that, we just took Mayo as it is, as it was standardized, and we're like, whoop, into ZK we go. Now we have a stronger assumption on a slightly stronger assumption on Mayo, but luckily the guy who designed Mayo was on the team of this paper, and we were like, Wart, is this secure? And he's like, yeah, that sounds fine. And if somebody knows something about the security of multivariate quadratic signature schemes, then it's Wart, because otherwise he would have broken what we did on a laptop over a weekend. But he didn't, so it should still be okay. So the first solution, which runs the hashes inside the proof system, so that allows us to get down to something like 29 kilobytes. Now that's the size of the best lattice solution, but like there's no additional things that we assume about like the world out there. We don't need like something special for lattices that you only assume to be secure so you can build this thing, right? It's like take off-the-shelf solutions, put them together, 29 kilobytes, and signing time of 75 milliseconds. At least on the laptop we had. That was a slightly bigger machine, but it was the laptop we had lying around. Fun story there, and this is for all of you who are implementing things. We looked at our benchmark times, we're like, this is not too great. And then we looked at them again and we're like, well, what if you add O2 to your GCC? And it turned out to improve things by a factor 5. so now we actually have to go back and figure out if our older benchmark scripts were also without -02. So embarrassing things that you notice at times. But that's a great trick of improving your efficiency, I heard. Anyways, if you cut out the hash from the zero knowledge proof system and do things using a stronger assumption, and then you can get down to 7.5 kilobytes. And your signing time and your verify time are below 50 milliseconds. Now this is something where we're getting closer to things people might actually care about in similar, like at the same time to our work, recently something appeared, like a code-based line signature scheme on ePrint. I'm like, I think Persichetti et al. Who was behind this. I haven't looked at this, haven't had the time to look at it yet. They also claim to get like very small blind signatures and have good sign verify times. However, no implementation so far, so can't say that, just to be completely honest with you. But might be an interesting direction to look into in the future. So, this and then suites. So what I wanted to say here is that there is a lot of exciting cryptography besides signatures and key encapsulation. Now if you actually work in industry, then key encapsulation and signatures is basically everything you care about, but there is more, and it's getting post-quantum secure slowly, but there's a lot of work to be done. It's actually worth studying. And very often we are lacking behind the classical security and efficiency. I mean, we also do for post-quantum signatures, but like the gap is even bigger between, for example, classical OPRFs and post-quantum OPRFs. So there's a lot of work to be done, but it's a lot of interesting work, and it might actually be useful. So, you know, worthwhile looking into. And now you can get your coffee and sit in the sun.